She wasn't pleased, and make no mistake, people noticed. Throughout the game, there were whispers that Aya Wilson might be talking things over with Becky, her closest confidant, from the sidelines. They've always been tight. But what really happens when unquestioned dominance collides with the quiet emergence of someone who refuses to stay in the shadows? For years, Aya Wilson sat atop women's basketball like an immovable force. MVP awards, championship banners, total control of the narrative. A WNBA champion with absolute authority. Yet what do you do when a single phone call signals that the future is advancing without you? Behind closed doors, conversations shifted. A legacy was quietly reevaluated, and the spotlight Wilson believed was permanently hers began drifting toward the very player she had spent years downplaying, Caitlin Clark. Was it pride that clouded her vision, or fear of what she knew was coming? Caitlin Clark didn't just arrive, she seized the entire basketball landscape. And yes, it was astonishing to watch. This story isn't about box scores or viral highlights. It's about ego, rivalry, and how a carefully cultivated resentment can become the engine that dismantles a reign. Because the most dangerous rival isn't always the one you confront head-on. Sometimes it's the one who replaces you while you're still admiring your reflection. To understand how this moment came to be, you have to rewind to 2022. At that time, Aya Wilson was firmly planted at the summit of the sport. She had MVP trophies proudly displayed, championship rings glistening under camera flashes, and endorsement deals pouring in from major brands competing for her attention. Media outlets crowned her the defining player of her generation without hesitation. Analysts spoke her greatness as fact, not opinion. She was elite from day one, but at that stage she was operating on an entirely different plane, making WNBA history with ease. Each morning, when Wilson looked in the mirror, she saw a player who had fought relentlessly to reach the top through talent and resolve. She believed she had earned the unquestioned right to be the focal point of women's basketball. Sharing that spotlight wasn't part of the plan, especially not with a college guard from Iowa who hadn't yet proven herself at the professional level. Then Caitlin Clark emerged, and everything Wilson believed about her position in the basketball universe began to shift. Clark didn't climb the ladder quietly. She didn't wait patiently for approval or ease her way into relevance. She burst into the national spotlight like a comet, shattering records and leaving defenders frozen in disbelief. Even before her biggest moments, she was already rewriting history. Arenas sold out weeks in advance. Television ratings soared to numbers the WNBA had chased for decades. Every sports network led with her highlights, deep, logo-range three-pointers launched with fearless confidence. Nearly 10 million viewers tuned in, captivated by a competitive fire that reminded longtime fans of legends they thought were gone for good. The media couldn't get enough. Casual fans who had never followed women's basketball were suddenly scheduling their lives around her games. And Aya Wilson, the player who believed she was the rightful ruler of this domain, struggled to watch someone else receive the adoration she felt was hers alone. Instead of embracing the moment, instead of acknowledging that Clark's rise was lifting the entire sport, Wilson made a decision that would later haunt her. She didn't see Clark as a partner in progress or an ambassador for the game. She labeled her a threat, an enemy. At first, the campaign was subtle, so subtle most people brushed it off. A liked post questioning Clark's long-term legitimacy. A vague tweet that cast doubt without naming names. Carefully timed posts highlighting veteran accolades whenever Clark broke another record. Each time Clark achieved something historic, Wilson's social media seemed to respond with reminders of her own resume or commentary about what real greatness looks like. When Clark was named Time Magazine's 2024 Athlete of the Year, an honor that should have been celebrated as a win for women's sports as a whole, Wilson's response was anything but celebratory. Instead, it carried a tone of skepticism and restrained bitterness. To those paying attention, the message was unmistakable. Wilson didn't view Clark as a rising star who could elevate the league. She viewed her as a direct threat to everything she had built. Jealousy has a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully it's hidden. It surfaced in interviews filled with loaded phrases like sustained excellence and true impact, clearly aimed at minimizing Clark's influence. It showed up in increasingly sharp, passive-aggressive remarks as Clark's popularity eclipsed anything Wilson had experienced. And it was obvious in how Wilson deflected or shut down whenever reporters asked about Clark's achievements. The fatal mistake Wilson made was internalizing every Caitlin Clark success as an attack on her own legacy. Instead of seeing unprecedented growth for the sport, she personalized it. She convinced herself she was standing up for veterans, when in reality, she was shielding her ego from the uncomfortable truth. A younger, more marketable star had arrived. What Wilson didn't realize, what she couldn't have known, was that Team USA decision-makers were watching closely. Every interaction, every comment, every reaction, and they were documenting it all with professional detachment. This leads to the part rarely discussed by mainstream basketball media. While everyone praises Wilson's dominance, awards, and accolades, a two-time Olympic gold medalist and multiple-time WNBA champion, there's a flaw in her game that becomes glaring on the international stage. Insiders refer to it as the special whistle. In the WNBA, Wilson averages close to 12 free throw attempts per game. On paper, that suggests unstoppable dominance. But film study tells another story. It reveals a player who excels at selling contact, exaggerated reactions on drives, theatrical appeals on clean defensive plays. A significant portion of her scoring relies on favorable officiating that has long benefited star players in the league. That formula works domestically. The rules favor offense. Referees know the stars. The system supports it. International basketball, governed by FIBA, is entirely different. Officials don't care about MVPs, endorsements, or social media followings. Physical defense isn't discouraged, it's expected. Contact that sends Wilson to the line repeatedly in the WNBA is often ignored overseas. Team USA scouts saw this firsthand during international exhibitions, and it raised serious concerns. Wilson's efficiency didn't dip, it collapsed. Without constant whistles, without stoppages to reset her rhythm, she struggled to adjust. Her offensive game, so effective in one environment, proved far less reliable on the global stage. She wasn't a universal system player. She was built for a very specific one. You were the league's MVP just a season ago, and even after falling short in the finals, you were still invited to write a featured column for the Players' Tribune, a clear sign of status and respect. But that kind of environment does not exist at the Olympics or the World Cup. There are no safety nets there. Now compare that reality to Caitlin Clark. When Clark scores, she does it in ways no official on the planet can erase. She pulls up from 30 feet and buries shots that leave defenders frozen, staring at the scoreboard in disbelief. 26 feet? 30? It doesn't matter. When she's going left, in rhythm, the result is inevitable. When defenders make contact with Clark, she doesn't exaggerate, stumble, or search for a whistle. She plays through it. She finishes anyway. Her step-back threes and deep-range jumpers define what self-created offense truly looks like. She beats defenders with decision-making, spacing, footwork, and elite basketball IQ, not by initiating borderline contact and hoping for a call. That's why her game translates everywhere. Any court, any rule set, any country. It's built on skill, not system manipulation. Watch them side by side and the contrast becomes unavoidable. Wilson seeks contact, then pauses, expecting the whistle and the free throws that follow. Clark expects contact, adjusts in midair, and still scores. Wilson's approach thrives in the tightly managed structure of the WNBA. Clark's approach thrives universally because it depends on nothing but pure basketball ability. Then came the moment that changed everything. Team USA released its preliminary player pool for the 2026 World Cup, a tournament that carries added weight because it directly affects qualification and preparation for the 2028 Olympics. When Wilson scanned the list, her name was missing. According to multiple sources close to the program, her reaction was explosive. The player who had spent 2 years believing herself untouchable realized in an instant that she had been replaced by the very player she had worked so hard to undermine. The reported meltdown stretched on for days. Wilson immediately began making phone calls, urgent, frantic attempts to get answers from anyone connected to USA basketball. Her representatives scrambled to arrange last-minute meetings with coaches who had already shifted their focus to evaluating the players who actually made the roster. At the same time, Clark was receiving congratulations from teammates, staff, and fans who were thrilled to see her earn the chance to represent her country. That contrast says everything. Clark posted a brief, sincere message of gratitude. No subtle jabs. No demands. Just appreciation and excitement for the opportunity to learn from veteran players. Wilson's camp, by comparison, quickly began circulating stories about supposed scheduling conflicts that allegedly prevented her inclusion. Few people bought it. Most recognized it as a transparent attempt to save face after a public and definitive rejection from a program she believed belonged to her. Here's the part that truly matters. Team USA coaches had been monitoring Wilson's behavior for nearly 2 years before making this call. Every passive-aggressive remark was logged. Every cryptic social media interaction was noted. Every interview where she took thinly veiled shots at Clark became part of a growing file. They weren't just evaluating talent, they were evaluating character. They were building a team to represent the United States on the world stage, and they needed players who elevate one another, not tear teammates down out of insecurity. This is why character outweighs statistics in international competition. Global tournaments operate on a completely different wavelength than domestic leagues. It's not just about numbers, trophies, or record books. It's about managing suffocating pressure while an entire nation expects gold. It's about keeping composure when hostile crowds roar in languages you don't understand and officials make calls that feel relentlessly unfair. It's about representing your country with dignity when cameras from every corner of the world capture every reaction, good or bad. The Olympic stage magnifies everything. It exposes flaws that domestic play can conceal. More than anything, it reveals who an athlete truly is. A player who can't handle criticism on social media, who unravels when strangers question her accomplishments, is not equipped to shoulder the psychological weight of international competition. A player who reacts to a rival's success with jealousy and resentment instead of professional respect is not someone you want in a locker room when the stakes are at their highest. Team USA coaches understand this better than anyone. They've seen talented teams implode not because of a lack of skill, but because ego poisoned chemistry. They know one toxic presence can do more damage than any opponent. Wilson's reaction to being cut ultimately confirmed that the coaches made not just the right choice, but the only choice. Her response wasn't quiet resolve or a determination to improve. It was an emotional spiral, days of anger, excuses, and demands for explanations. Imagine that same reaction after a heartbreaking loss in a gold medal game. Imagine that frustration directed at teammates, officials, or the media on the global stage. The coaches imagined it too, and wisely chose to avoid it altogether. Now contrast that with Caitlin Clark, who spent 2 years absorbing constant criticism from Wilson and her circle without ever responding publicly. Clark has endured more scrutiny, manufactured controversy, and unfair criticism than almost any player in recent women's basketball history, and she handled it all with composure. That quiet professionalism is why sponsors trust her and why national team selectors believe she can represent the country with class. While Wilson was engaging with shady posts and making subtle digs, Clark was letting her performance speak. While Wilson used interviews to minimize a younger player's achievements, Clark consistently spoke about learning from veterans and contributing however she could. The difference is stark and telling. The growing chemistry between Clark and players like Aaliyah Boston represents something special, something that Wilson's oversized ego would never have allowed to develop. Watching Boston dominate Wilson in that opening matchup was shocking. Seeing Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham genuinely enjoy and support that moment said everything. That kind of unity, growth, and shared success was never going to flourish in an environment ruled by insecurity. Their bond, shaped by fierce college competition and genuine mutual respect, gives Team USA something invaluable, a foundation built on admiration rather than ego. This is exactly what the national team needs right now. Not stars demanding the spotlight, but players who can seamlessly blend into a system designed for collective success. Team USA needs athletes who elevate everyone around them through unselfish play, emotional intelligence, and positive energy. They need competitors willing to leave personal statistics behind and commit fully to what benefits the group as a whole. Wilson's recent history suggests the opposite approach. Over the past 2 years, her actions indicate she would have required the system to revolve around her. Her numbers, her recognition, her legacy. Clark's record tells a completely different story. She has consistently shown a willingness to do whatever it takes to win, even if that means surrendering personal acclaim for team success. In the end, character isn't just a factor, it's the deciding factor. What we're witnessing in women's basketball right now isn't merely a roster adjustment. It's a philosophical shift. The sport is redefining what it values. The era of the special whistle star is fading. A new era is emerging, one defined by undeniable skill, versatility, and shot-making that cannot be neutralized by officiating or system advantages. Team USA's decision sends a message that extends far beyond a single selection. They chose character over chaos. They chose professionalism over petty rivalries. They chose players who expand the game rather than fracture it. Caitlin Clark's influence stretches well beyond American borders in ways Wilson's brand never truly achieved. International fans embraced Clark long before she reached the professional stage. Her deep-range shooting, fearless confidence, and relentless competitiveness resonate across cultures. Those traits translate universally. She brings energy and excitement that grow the global audience for women's basketball, precisely what the Olympic stage requires. Wilson appealed primarily to an established fan base. Clark creates entirely new ones. With the 2026 World Cup approaching and the 2028 Olympics on the horizon, the global sports calendar is setting the stage for defining moments. Team USA is preparing to showcase Clark's leadership on basketball's biggest platforms. The plan is clear: build the system around her vision, her adaptability, and her basketball intelligence. The constant drama and attention-seeking behavior Wilson might have introduced would have been a distraction during both preparation and competition. Clark, by contrast, remains locked in on team success, not personal validation. That distinction matters when you're representing an entire nation. Power rarely collapses in public view. It erodes quietly, behind closed doors, through moments most people never witness. Confidence can slowly harden into entitlement. Leadership can drift into isolation. And when decisions finally arrive, they don't come with explanations, only consequences. At the highest levels, reputations aren't undone by failure alone, but by how someone reacts when the spotlight begins to move elsewhere. So the question that lingers after the headlines fade is this: was this simply a roster decision, or the first move in a larger recalibration of women's basketball? One where influence is earned differently, and legacy no longer guarantees immunity. And if the balance of power truly is shifting, who will be next to feel it? Because this story didn't end with a single phone call, it merely revealed how much more is still unfolding.